Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with the Dean. I'm Turney Stevens, and I'm delighted today to welcome back to the Lipscomb campus a friend of the university, Cal Turner. Cal, welcome.
Thank you, Turney. It's a joy to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you. Cal Turner, of course, is the retired chairman and chief executive officer of Dollar General Corporation. You've done a number of things in your lifetime, lots of civic leadership. You also started the Cal Turner Program for Moral Leadership in the Professions at Vanderbilt University. And I think what I'd like to do, Cal, is maybe start there. We'll talk about Dollar General later in the conversation. But I think all of us are alarmed at what we read in the headlines these days. It seems to be fraud after fraud, scandal after scandal. We started the Dean Institute for Corporate Governance and Integrity here to try to address that. What has happened to us here in America?
Turney, I wish I had an answer, but I'm not inclined to make any pronouncement about what is going on. I've been in decision-making trauma in my career, and I know that it's hard to get everything right, and there are a lot of conflicting values out there. But my fear is that we don't stay in touch with the fundamental values of our country. I think the Founding Fathers would probably have a lot to say to us about the extant values today. They're just, perhaps they aren't the same. Perhaps there is so much pressure for dynamic news, and news becomes entertainment, and everybody is watching everybody. And unfortunately, I think we're becoming too blame inclined, to blame somebody when something goes wrong, to say, who did that? Mm-hmm. We wrestled with that in our company, Turney. And my dad, when he would say, well, son, who did that? I'd say, Daddy, I'm not going to tell you, because there wasn't anyone who. If something went wrong, there were several persons involved. Let's ask what. Let's not ask who. And if we ask what happened, maybe we can all come together to fix it better. Mm-hmm. But I see that as pretty fundamental to the problem. Somebody has to blame somebody else.
Now, Cal, I know you're a man of faith. You make no secret about that. You are very transparent, and you talk about your faith in your speeches and talks and your activities. Tell me about that walk of faith. How did you come about your Christian faith?
Well, I hope that I don't exploit my faith by sharing it, but it does define me. It happened to me when I was 11 years old, and I knew my life from that point would be different in some way. I didn't yet know how, Turney, but I knew that the stamp of Christ was upon me. It happened in conjunction with the Old Rugged Cross one Sunday evening in Scottsville, Kentucky, waiting to be picked up after the youth fellowship meeting at our church. Across the street from the church, I sat on my uncle's front porch, and I received the conviction that it was very personal to me that Jesus Christ had died for me. It was wonderful that he had for everybody else, but he had done it specifically for me. And I wanted to respond to that the rest of my life. And I've needed forgiveness. I've needed to rely on that forgiveness many times in my life thereafter. And maybe that's the problem with our society today. Everyone isn't blessed with the same sense of grace that you never make yourself all right, but you have been made eternally okay by that wonderful Lord.
And you mentioned growing up in Scottsville, Kentucky. You mentioned going to church as a child. You mentioned your conversion experience at age 11. So apparently your parents, both your mom and your dad, were Christians. I assume you grew up at the knee of a mom and dad who taught you what they believed right and wrong to be. Is that the case?
They did, primarily influenced by my mother, who grew up with 3 brothers and knew how to manage men and boys. And for example, my wonderful mother would say to teenage Cal, "Son, for a good boy, you get into a lot of trouble." She separated I was a good boy, but of course there was all of this trouble we had to deal with. And that became the management style of Dollar General many years later. We tried to affirm the person and come together to address the gaps and the problems and the issues, but to affirm the person.
Great lesson for all of us as moms and dads and as employers, as teachers, and so I appreciate that. Well, that's a good segue to talk about Dollar General. You did grow up in Scottsville, Kentucky, and your dad had started...
Attorney, it's the center of the universe, Scottsville, Kentucky. You probably did not know that.
Well, I knew it was close to the center of the universe, but maybe for our viewers who may not know geographically exactly where the center of the universe is within the state of Kentucky, tell us where Scottsville is on the map of Kentucky.
Well, Scottsville is in south central Kentucky. It's near Bowling Green, Franklin, Glasgow, 60 to 65 miles north of Nashville.
Okay.
And when you grow up in Scottsville, it's a very small town, so you come to Nashville for things that you need that aren't available in Scottsville. So I practically grew up in Nashville also.
Made that trip repeatedly.
Yes.
Now, your dad had started a business in Scottsville, and I guess your earliest memories would be of that as a fairly small business. It was called, I think, J.L. Turner and Company. Is that right?
J.L. Turner and Son.
And
My
Son.
dad was the son.
Okay.
And
So actually your grandfather started
James
it.
Luther and Cal started it together. J.L. had become the head of the family when he was 11 years old. His father was killed in a freak wrestling accident on a Saturday afternoon. And Luther Turner took over the responsibility for the mortgaged family farm, had 3 younger siblings to take care of, and only a 3rd grade education.
So, Cal, would you describe the Turner store? I guess initially it was just a single store. Would you describe that as a general merchandise store? Would you describe it as a dry goods store? How did it start?
Well, I guess dry goods. A store wasn't the actual start of the company, Turney. It was this big brick building in Scottsville, Kentucky that Luther and Cal bought for half price, and a Turner will buy anything for half price. And it was a wholesale company, not a retail company originally. And then after the Second World War, my dad discovered that conservative country merchants wouldn't buy from him all that he needed them to buy, so he had to open his own stores.
Now, I've heard you tell various tales over the years about the stores, and I remember hearing on one occasion you told the story about your mom encouraging you and your 3 brothers and sisters, 1 brother, 2 sisters, to pray because Dad has bought certain kind of merchandise and we really need snow.
We need snow. She'd say, "Now children, until you get results. Pray for snow every night because your dad has overbought 4-buckle overshoes and he won't be able to sell them and he won't be able to pay off the banks if it doesn't snow. So you pray for snow every night.
And then when it did snow and it was Christmas, the shoppers couldn't get out and shop, and so your mom told you to pray that the snow would melt.
Pray that the snow would melt, yes. That was my early lesson that the weather has an effect on retailing, and retailers still blame the weather a lot. God has a hard time getting the weather right for us.
So you came to Nashville and you went to Vanderbilt University, you graduated, and then went back home, I guess, right?
Yes, but let me tell you about going to Vanderbilt. I wanted to get away from my father's shadow. And as a junior in high school at Scottsville High School, I had catalogs from schools in the Pacific Northwest. I was going to get away from Scottsville, Kentucky. And my dad took a look at it and he said, "Son, I admire a man who makes up his own mind, and I want you to go to school anywhere you want to go to school, but I'll pay your way to Vanderbilt."
Did that make the decision easier for you?
It just made it a lot easier, Turney. I had just been working for him in the stores and warehouses, and I started out at 25 cents an hour. I couldn't have sent myself anywhere except where he would pay my way.
So you came to Nashville, you went to Vanderbilt, you graduated. Did you go back immediately to Kentucky to go back to work for the company business?
No, and my dad was disappointed. He wanted me to come from Vanderbilt right back into the business, but I felt that I needed to learn who I was and to learn leadership as well as I could. And I chose to go to Naval Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island for 4 months. And then I had 3 years in the Navy. My first year and a half were on Admiral John McCain's flagship in Norfolk,
Really?
the father of the senator.
Yeah.
And my last year and a half were in Scotland, on the northern coast of Scotland, way north of the Arctic Circle.
Even north of St. Andrews, the golf course.
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh, yes. Very far north of St. Andrews.
So did you go to work for the family business then when you came back from your Navy experience?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I
All right.
did. And it was a family entrepreneurial business. It was pure chaos, Turney. That was the most disorganized place you could imagine. And my dad just sort of made things happen as the entrepreneur.
And how was it working for a dad? Was that easy or was it hard?
It was a joy, and it could be difficult at times. I remember I was maybe in my first year with the company out of the Navy playing bridge at home with my parents and a friend. And my dad seemed to be kind of aggressive with me, and he was chiding me, and some of my Navy rough edges came out, and I said, "Would you get off my butt?" The atmosphere changed. My dad almost cried. I had never spoken to him man to man in that kind of way, and we all folded our cards. That was the end of the game. The next day at work, I knew that I needed to apologize to him. So I went back to his office, and he had an executive washroom, and he was back there with the door closed. So it was wonderful. I could apologize to a closed door. And of course, Turney, he was supposed to apologize back. That's why you apologize, isn't it? And then you receive an apology. Everybody's okay. So I went through my spiel, ta-da. So, Daddy, I'm sorry. Nothing. Finally, he cleared his throat. He said, "Son, I accept your apology. You know, son, in every successful relationship, there has to be flexibility. However, in a father-son relationship, I don't think anyone should expect the father to be flexible."
Don't do as I say, do as I do, or vice versa, I guess.
But there was a great lesson there for me. I did a lot of processing of that. I had to work on my own flexibility throughout my life. And I should not have a high expectation of the other person's flexibility. I only can control myself.
So you experienced, I would think, some of the dynamics that many people going into family businesses struggle with. This issue of confusing family dynamics with business relationships gets very, very tough sometimes, I guess.
It does. My dad, in particular, had no boundary between family and business because after he had gotten past the third grade in school, he had more education than his father, my grandfather, and he was needed in the business with my father. So he grew up in the business, and it was about family.
And we think of Dollar General as a huge corporation, which of course it is today, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But at that point in time, and even after you joined the business, your dad struggled, and there were times where he had to figure out how to pay off the bank note. I know I've heard you tell the story. Years later, you were asked by investors, I think in New York, why do you end your fiscal year in December as opposed to the end of January like most retailers? Tell that story. I think that's an interesting story. That's a window into how he had to struggle to make ends meet.
Oh, yes, and I did not know the answer to that question. I had brought my brother with me to the meeting and told him I'd handle all the answers, but I didn't have an answer. So Steve came to my rescue, and he said, "Well, heck, in Scottsville, we thought December was when the year ended."
And of course
laughed.
it is.
Yeah. And then I went back and I said, "Daddy, why do we end our year in December?" He said, "That's when I have the most cash on my balance sheet, and I can stay out of the bank better the month of January than any other month of the year. And then I'll go right back into debt in February." He had to stay out of the banks 1 month.
Not borrow any money for a month.
Right.
And only during January could he afford to
Yes.
do that. He had to stock up on inventory the rest of the year.
Yes. But I'm not sure what I'd have done had I known the real answer, Turney, because I did think about what the recipient of the answer would do with it, and I'm not sure the Wall Street analyst would appreciate that truth.
Well, you became president, I guess, a few years after you joined the company, maybe a decade or so.
Yeah.
You'd served your apprenticeship, and so Dad made you, the CEO? What was your title, CEO, or was it president?
It was president, and I was asked that question by a reporter, and my answer he couldn't do anything with in his article. He said, now that your dad's chairman and you're president, who's the CEO? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I am, until he wants to be for a while. And then he is, but he always gets tired of it, and then I pick it up again.
So after you joined the company, you took the company public. Tell me about that decision. That must have been an interesting decision. And was that the point in time where the company changed its name to
Yes.
Dollar General when that happened?
It was interesting to me that my dad attempted to take the company public my senior year at Vanderbilt, and we had Dollar General's registration as a case study in one of my management classes at Vanderbilt. But the market went south and he withdrew the offering. But then, after my coming with the company in 1965, he decided in 1968 to take the company public. J.L. Turner and Son. At Vanderbilt, we had this prospectus, J.L. Turner and Son. But my dad said, well, we're going to change the name. We're going to take Turner off of it so it can identify with our stores, which I hated. I liked the Turner name on it, but he was right to do that. And we went public in December of 1968.
And how did you pick the name Dollar General? I would think most people in hearing that name, if they haven't been in the stores, and I would be surprised if there's anybody that hasn't been in a Dollar General store since there's so many of them, but most people would assume you sell dollar merchandise.
Yeah.
How did you pick the name Dollar General Corporation?
Well, originally it was nothing over $1. My dad had observed that the Louisville department stores and the Nashville ones, like Harvey's and Kane Sloan down here, would run dollar-day sales and everything would be priced at $1. Mm-hmm. And he had the idea of a store that would have nothing over $1. He would sell some things 2 for $1 or 5 for $1, even some things 20 for $1, but $1. And he wanted the excuse to buy anything as a buyer he wanted to buy, so he put General in there. General store is, in the country, it's where you buy anything that's bought or sold. It's in a general store. So he named it Dollar General Store.
General Store.
Yes.
And so the idea was to fill a niche in rural communities, very rural communities actually, where you were basically the general merchandise store for that small market, that small
Yes.
community.
Yes.
And the business began to grow. Now, along about that time, or maybe just slightly later, there was another retailer down in Arkansas who had the idea of doing something similar to what you and your dad were doing. And his name, of course, was Sam Walton, and he was beginning to build a chain called Walmart. And that became a global phenomenon, obviously even bigger than Dollar General is today.
Yes.
How did you find your niche along the way and not be overrun by the enormous growth of Walmart? How are they differentiated?
Well, Dollar General operates a small neighborhood store that is customer friendly in size, and the idea was to have very focused selection of the essentials in every category. We wouldn't carry everything, we wouldn't carry every brand of toothpaste or toilet paper, but just carry a few so we could cover the consumables spectrum in a small store that is not intimidating to our struggling customers that we loved as a company. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very focused store. Sam Walton studied retailing extensively, and he went into the larger discount format of retailing. And he was an incredible person, and he learned from every retail venue. He was a dollar store franchisee. We acquired an Arkansas dollar store company, and the head of that company said, "Did you know Sam Walton was a franchise of United Dollar Stores?" No. He said he was, for 1 year, he owned a franchise, and he was our highest volume franchisee, and then he canceled it. And I called him up and I said, "Sam, you're our best franchisee. Why did you cancel?" He said, "Jerry, I've already learned everything from you that I can." He was very, very honest and upfront about canceling the franchise.
Sure. And so he went on to build a phenomenal business in
Oh,
Walmart.
yeah.
We all know that. You continued to build Dollar General. It began to expand and to expand very rapidly. You did face some challenges. One of those challenges, to go back to the issue of family businesses, was the role that you, your father, and now your brother would play in the business. You were one of 4 children. There was an older sister, and then yourself, and then a younger sister, and then the youngest brother, Steve.
Yes, you have that right.
Did I? Did I get that right? And then Steve came into the business at a point in time, and so you were working with him. And tell me how that worked out.
Steve is refreshingly different from Cal Jr. And he was a great addition to the company, but in our upbringing, his being 7 years younger than I think it was just in the DNA that his older brother would never be his boss. And I didn't blame him for that thought, because I probably wasn't the greatest older brother. He was so much younger, I didn't pay much attention to him. But he used to say, Cal Jr., you decide what you're going to do so I know what I'm not going to do, because I'm not going into the business if you do. You're not going to be my boss. Well, Steve was in the business for several years, and it worked pretty well, but the company did get into trouble in 1986, 87, and in January of 1988. Steve and I actually jointly made the decision for him to leave the company, though it was the most painful decision I have ever made. And after that, the company got very serious about change, about new management, an independent board, and it took about 2.5 to 3 years for the turnaround. But then in the 90s, Dollar General really hit its stride as a high growth company.
Now, you've talked about that decision to separate from your brother publicly. You've written about it in a book, and so there's really no secret about all of that.
That's true.
You've talked about praying about that decision. You've talked about going to the scriptures and reading the scriptures about pruning the vine, and how excruciatingly difficult that was for you to come to that decision. Probably not an unusual decision in a family business. I suspect that has played out in other family businesses. Do you have any advice to give other people who may be struggling with those kinds of family dynamics?
Well, I think family is about celebrating uniqueness, and there is uniqueness among siblings. Each is one of a kind, and they're not just alike. But the differences between them can be problematic in the stress and the strain of business decision making. Business isn't always sweetness and light and everything's just going wonderfully. Businesses can get into trouble. And when Dollar General did, then it became apparent that there was really a leadership problem at the top, where there was a father and 2 brothers, and we had to address that for the benefit of the broader family that was now the company family. And again, I would credit Steve as being very helpful in making that decision.
And this was after you had public investors.
Oh, yes.
And so there were other people involved in these decisions. There were other dynamics other than just the sibling and paternal relationships.
Absolutely, attorney. That was 20 years after the company had become public.
And so you had a board, you had investors, you had pressures on you as the CEO that you had to respond to, and you had to make some tough decisions. Now, after you made that decision with your brother, I've forgotten how many years later, but you also had to make another very difficult decision with your father.
Yeah.
Tell us about that decision.
It wasn't another year later, Turney. It
Is
was
that right?
the same year. January, I terminated my brother. July, our mother unexpectedly died. And we were putting a new management team and an independent board together and doing a lot of change in the company. And in November of that same year, there was an MIS proposal that management was taking to the board, and my dad very strongly opposed it because he hated computers. And so the board decided that it was going to address the leadership issue that still existed between Cal Sr. and Cal Jr. And the board forced my dad out as chairman in November. So Steve left the company in January, mother died in July. My dad forced out as chairman because he was a strong independent board, and I became chairman not under the greatest circumstances. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of resolving of that to do in the family. It was really hard, but our family has always been well grounded in love, and families with that kind of grounding can weather amazing storms, which is what we had to do.
And so these decisions that you were forced to make, chose to make, did not breach the family relationships permanently. You were able to maintain a relationship with both your brother and your father until he died.
Yes, we. There was breach of relationship in the immediacy of those things happening. Immediately thereafter, yeah, there were broken relationships, but the family came back together. And I feel that my bonding with my brother is better, actually, than it would have been had this not happened. It's amazing how the real traumas can bring you closer together.
Mm-hmm. And of course, he's gone on to be a very successful businessman in his own right. He developed the Gulch real estate properties.
And what he's done in the world of philanthropy, and he and his wife Judy have served so many not-for-profits. Mm-hmm. They're wonderful. They're just wonderful people. Wonderful people.
Now, Cal, I want to go back to your tenure as the Chief Executive Officer of Dollar General. We've talked about the excruciatingly difficult decisions you had to make as a leader. Sometimes it's easy to overlook the fact that you were quite a leader from a business standpoint too. You made some brilliant decisions as a business leader, never mind the family dynamics issues and the board issues. For example, I know you came to a point in time where you made a very visionary and probably very scary decision to cease advertising, which for a retailer is a pretty radical decision to make. Take me through that. How did you make that decision, and why did you make that decision?
Well, the brilliant decisions of Dollar General weren't made by me, Turney. They were made by the management team that was determined to listen to the customer and to see what we could uniquely do in response to our customers' need. We wanted to give a better life to struggling people who came every day into the Dollar General store. And we observed that the expense of advertising, the expense of logistically supporting ads in all of these little stores all over everywhere consumed our warehouses and our trucks, and we were not in stock on the basics because we were running these ads. And our customer lived 3 to 5 miles from the store. They knew what we had. They couldn't afford to wait for an ad to get a good buy. They needed it when they ran out. And we said, wait a minute. We can better be in stock every day at the lowest everyday price if we eliminate advertising. But we were a public company. When you stop an ad, your sales go south. And Wall Street raises all kinds of rancor, I'll say, instead of hell.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But we say, well, you see, we have this strategy. We're going to be in stock with the lowest everyday price because that's what our customer needs for us. And we can better be in stock on the consumables if we don't have the advertising madness to deal with. By the way, our advertising to sales were about 3.6%. And after we finished this strategy, our advertising to sales happened to be less than 0.25%. We took that difference and gave lower prices to the customer. And we worked on our ability to be in stock. And ironically, in the 5 years of stopping advertising, we had the best same-store sales in our sector of retailing.
Our friend, Jim Wright, my friend, your friend, was here just a few weeks ago, the Chief Executive Officer of Tractor Supply, which has some similarities, I think, to Dollar General. And he made an interesting comment about the same philosophy. He said, we don't run sales because we want to own our customers. We don't want to rent our customers. And so your philosophy was to be a friend to the local community, not to entice the customer to only come in when you run a sale, but to have everyday low pricing and thereby make the stop at the Dollar General just a daily part of the routine, I guess. Was that the philosophy?
Yes. I fell in love with our customers as a 13-year-old who was a terrible clerk in our store in Scottsville. I was not good. By the way, since I wasn't any good at it, I have a real respect for all the work the associates do out there in the stores, because I can't do it. But I could see that these customers are struggling to get by. And if we could just help them out by having the merchandise when they need it at the lowest everyday price. Of course, we still had to balance that with a return for the shareholder, and we had to reward the employees. But it came together beautifully with a management team that was united by the value of serving the customers. 2 words in our mission statement: serving others. And as CEO of the company, I would say life divides everyone into one of 2 camps. One is pretty large, serving self, but we're in the camp, much smaller, of serving others. And there is reward, there is multifaceted reward in serving others. We proved that you can be financially profitable, but we also proved that customers and employees and shareholders all benefit from that. And the year that Dollar General listed on the New York Stock Exchange, it was number 8, I believe, among all New York Stock Exchange companies in long-term return for shareholders. The year we went on the New York Stock Exchange.
Very impressive. Now, your friends down in Arkansas became very, very good at sourcing.
Absolutely.
They sourced on a global basis. Increasingly, they became very aggressive purchasers in order to get the best deal possible for their customers. Did you follow that pattern at Dollar General, and did you begin to source overseas like Walmart did?
Yes, we did. We got into that a little bit later than we perhaps should have. Mm-hmm. But you have to source all over the world in order to have the greatest value for your customer.
There's so many things that I'd like to ask you about, Cal. We're almost out of time. I would like to take you up to the moment where you made the decision to sell the business. That must have been an interesting moment in your life. You sold it to Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts in New York, which has a reputation as a fairly aggressive buying group. Tell me about the decision, what led you to that, and then tell me perhaps how things have worked out since then.
Well, the decision happened when I had already retired as CEO. I was not CEO of the company when that happened. The company...
Still a major shareholder, though. The family,
oh, yes.
The family, I guess, was the largest single block of voting stock.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. And there was a decision of support that had to be made about what should happen in the shareholders' interest. Mm-hmm. But of course, I was concerned about the employees and the customers. It was just in my DNA to still be concerned about them. Ironically, Jerry Kohlberg had been on the team that had taken Dollar General public in 1968, the Bear Stearns team that took the company public. And now he was involved in taking the company private. Perhaps his understanding the company gave him a sense of the value it would be for his organization to acquire Dollar General. And so the best offer came from KKR. And it has been a very successful investment of them. The Turner family has not been a part of that, but they have done very well with Dollar General, and the stores are doing well, I'm happy to say.
Well, I'm looking at some numbers here that say that today there are more than 6,000 stores in 27 states.
Well, there are over 10,000 today.
Oh, is that right? Well, these numbers may be out of date.
That was at my time of retirement.
Okay, all right. So the company has become a major, major retailing force in the United States and has gone on to great success. I wish we had time to talk about the Moral Leadership Program at Vanderbilt. I know that's very important to you. You've become a very important civic leader in Nashville. You've taken roles that have put you in a position of great prominence in Nashville. I wish we had time to explore all of that, but I just must say, Cal, how much it's been a pleasure to have you on our campus today. Thank you for being here.
The joy is mine, Turney. Thank you very much.
Well, it's truly an honor to have Cal Turner on our campus. Thank you.
Thank you.
My guest today has been Cal Turner, who is the retired chairman and chief executive officer of Dollar General Corporation. Thanks for joining us for Conversations with the Dean. We'll see you again soon.